What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got an interesting topic to talk about with you guys. I want to talk about, this is going to be kind of a ramble, not really a structured video. I want to talk about the pros and cons of side opening automatic knives versus front opening automatic knives, or out the front knives, or OTFs. What we have here is a Benchmade Infidel, and then we have a ProTech Rockeye. Both of these are discontinued, but both of them are USA made automatic knives. And I thought this was a unique opportunity that I had, because this is actually owned by a local buddy. It used to be my automatic knife, but it's actually owned by a friend now who uses it all the time. And he said, "Can you put an edge back on it?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem." And then this Benchmade Infidel was lent to me by my good buddy Spirited Whiskey for review. We have not reviewed it yet, but it's going to serve as a good example. For those of you who have watched my content for a while, you'll remember I did a versus video between essentially the budget version of this video. I did the Boker Kalashnikov versus the Lightning OTF, two incredibly popular budget automatic knives. And so I've kind of touched on this before, but not in this way. That was an actual versus video, or a battle video. Those of you who are familiar with my battles playlist kind of know how I do that. That's not really what I want to talk, how I want to approach this. I kind of want to do a, philosophy style video here today, because I used to wave off automatic knives, especially OTFs, as novelties. And I have since very much changed my opinion on that, and I want to talk about it a little bit. Now, the first thing I have to point out to everybody is, for a lot of people, every point that I make in this episode is going to be a moot point, because automatic knives are not legal everywhere. And like in the case of the Infidel, this is really not legal in a lot of areas. Number one, it's a true dagger style blade, which means sharpened on both sides. Number two, it's a 4-inch blade, which is not going to be legal in a lot of places. Number three, it's an automatic knife. It's a locking knife. It's a big no-no in a lot of places. So for a lot of you, this is just going to be a video that's just, just for your entertainment. And I hope you're at least entertained by it. But for the rest of us who are fortunate enough to live in areas where these things are legal to carry, I'm going to give some pros and cons for each. I also want people to remember that I am approaching this from the standpoint of considering these knives as tools. How convenient they are as tools and nothing else. I am not interested in any other use for these knives, either of them, in any other setting. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. But I know people will talk about it in the comments section. I can't avoid it. So anyways, I think another thing that I really have to start off by pointing out is most automatic knives. Now, there are budget automatic knives, but for those of us who are, if I'm going to make an automatic knife purchase, at this point in my knife enthusiast whatever, I'm probably going to go after an expensive not military. I'm going to go after an expensive USA made automatic. I say military because Benchmade's done some, like this particular version is actually the Law Enforcement and Military Elite Edition. They've done some supplying to our military. ProTech's done some supplying to our military. Microtech has, some of the bigger names out there right now that are US. ProTech kind of staked their claim as one of the better, or if not the best, side opening automatic companies. Benchmade does a few OTF models. The Infidel is super famous. And then Microtech, of course, with their Ultratech, their Scarab, their Combat Troodon, and their Halo 6. Definitely. Now, when we talk about the OTF knives, I'm going to specifically be talking about double action knives. There are single action OTFs out there, but I'm going to be comparing the side opening automatic knives with the double action OTFs. The single action ones, it's cool, but there's like a very specific need of two hands step that you have to take when on the Halo 6 you have to cock it back, or on the Dark Angel you have to pull that lever down. I can't remember what that thing's called from ProTech, but yeah, that's what we're going to be comparing. So a double action out the front knife operates as you're seeing here. You pull back and it pulls the knife into the handle, and you push forward and it fires it back out. It does lock, most of them. In fact, all of them except for the what do you call that one? The Deadlock OTF that's like $1,500 and it's a custom. All of them have a little bit of blade play. You can hear that there. It's actually wiggling around. That's normal. Some of them have less, some of them have more. Blade play is normal. In terms of durability, they've actually surprised me. I've watched a lot of videos on people jamming the actual Infidel into a tree and kind of wiggling it around a little bit, and it ends up continuing to operate just fine. So they're a lot more durable than people think. I definitely would not call them hard use knives. They are carried by soldiers, and soldiers use them and beat on them. I honestly have not seen too many circumstances where an infidel or other high-end OTF knives have failed catastrophically unless they were being used for something kind of ridiculous. So they are fairly durable. On the downside, with an OTF, you have this area in here where if certain types of debris get in there, it can actually cause the blade to derail or not function. You don't want to get a whole bunch of water in there and let it sit, even though they do generally have drainage holes, because that can cause issues with the chassis. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can go wrong. General pocket lint, from what I found, both my brother, my sister, and my dad all carry Lightning OTFs. And what I've found is that my sister's rolling around in her purse, my dad rolling around in his in the console of his truck, and my dad's knife, not my dad. My brother's Lightning. He uses it at work every single day. It sits in his pocket. None of them clean their knives, right? They got pocket lint coming in and out. The only one that ever had any trouble, and the reason I'm using the Lightning is because it's a very inexpensive knife that's not created with nearly as much attention to detail as a knife like the Benchmade Infidel. My sister's knife got a small pebble jammed in there, and we ended up having to take it apart, pull the pebble out, and put it back together, and it was fine. It worked just fine. These do sort of derail. A lot of you guys know this. For those of you who don't know, if you've seen the movies where they hold this up to something and push the button and the blade goes right through it, that's in the movies. That's not what happens. That's ridiculous. They derail like that. It'll still leave a puncture hole, so don't test it. But here's what happens. It kind of does this, and then you just pull it out, locks back out, and then you're good to go. That's generally the case. They can just sort of, there are situations, I've heard about older Ultratechs, older Infidels, older Microtech knives, or whatever. I've heard of sometimes it's like a 1 in 500 fail. A lot of times that has to do with whether or not they are being properly maintained, cleaned, lubricated, excess friction, as there's two rail systems and two different springs in here. And so there is friction in there, but if it's been cleaned and maintained and lubricated properly, then it's going to keep going. For those of you who are wondering, what type of lubrication should I use on my OTF? Because I don't want to use a lubrication, that's going to gunk up and attract lint and stuff. Use a dry lubrication. Like the Rem oil is actually what Microtech, I believe they still use Rem oil in their factory. It's a dry Teflon based lubricant. It leaves little flakes of Teflon behind, which is really good for the internal parts of an OTF. Don't soak it. Just give it a couple sprays in there, open it a few times, maybe 10 times, let it kind of get in there and move around, and then you're good to go. The other benefit of an OTF is that it is, and this point has been made to me over and over and over again. When I did my earliest Lightning video, I have two Lightning OTF videos. And I did my earliest one, I said, OTFs are novelty toys. Even the more expensive ones are kind of crazy. They're so expensive, and all it does is just give you this automatic, it doesn't really give you an advantage in a situation, in terms of speed. And I still stand by this. A knife that deploys like this with a button, or even just a knife that's got a flipper tab on it, is still going to deploy arguably just as fast. The knife that's been proven to be the fastest out of your pocket, just so we can put this argument to rest. This is a done argument. Is knives with a deployment style like the Emerson Wave. This catches your pocket as you pull it out, and it's deployed before you've even got it like fully up and in your face. So if you want to come at it from that perspective, then there you go. We're not going to talk about deployment speed. OTFs are just as fast as anything else out there. But the nice thing is if you're working, outside and you've got a hand busy, like I can deploy pretty much any folding knife with one hand and then move it out of the way and then close it. But you can see the steps there. I mean, that's what we're working with on a folding knife, is deploy it and then move the liner out of the way and then move it down and then put it back in your pocket. An OTF skips a lot of those steps. It's just pull it out of your pocket, in, out. It's easy. That's about as easy as it gets. That is the best reason to carry an OTF as a tool. It's just easy to use. Honestly, I could make a case for the Benchmade Infidel specifically on a construction site because it's actually got an easier operating switch. This is very easy. It's not nearly as hard as some of the Microtech ones that I've handled. It's very, very convenient to use that knife in that setting. I always use this example. If I'm up on a ladder, right? And the ladder's not on a stable surface, which a lot of people are like, well, you should make sure you've got a stable surface with your ladder before you sit. Okay, fine. But if you've worked on a construction site or any outdoor, you've been doing anything outside, if you ever used a ladder, you know that there are some situations where you have to get to an area and the ground that you have to, the ground that you've been granted by the circumstance is just not level, or you've got different textures or different surfaces. It's not always ideal, right? Not everything is just a perfect flat plane, and it's just, you would only make a choice outside of that flat plane based on stupidity. No, sometimes you're just not dealt, the optimal cards of the situation. So you're not on a stable surface. You've got one hand busy holding something up, right? And then you need to, it's like, there's something in the way. I need a tool to get in there and move that thing out of the way or make a cut real quick, right? It may not be a knife task, but in that specific situation or anything even remotely close to that, an OTF, pull it out of your pocket, bam, use that blade, bam, put it back in your pocket or toss it somewhere, whatever. That's awesome. An OTF works really well for that. Really, really well. Of course, considering you live in an area where it's okay to carry a knife like this, right? So OTFs can be great. They're not super durable. You cannot, depend on that lock. That's going to be one of the weakest locks made available to any knife that is not a fixed blade out there. I don't care what anybody says. A liner lock is stronger than the locking mechanism or the little pins that are holding that blade into place. They're plenty durable, and they're going to do everything that you would reasonably expect of an OTF. Now remember, I'm talking about knives in this caliber. The US made, the high-end OTFs. Guardian Tactical. We've got some other companies that are associated with Tony Marfione. Is it his son? I can't remember. There's some other new, really nice stuff hitting the scene now. And then your Benchmades, things like that. So not a super strong lock. They're not knives that you want to take apart. That's the other disadvantage. It's really important that you keep them clean, but at the same time, they're very complicated on the inside. And if you're not experienced with it, you can easily mess it up. Easily, right? A lot of people are going to go, oh, I've done it a million times, it's really easy. Okay, well, that's fine. But for the vast majority of people, they're not going to be easy to take apart. So it's, number one, it's really important to keep them clean and maintained. But contradictory to that statement, it's not advised that you take these things apart, right? You can get gunk in there. It can mess it up. Yeah, it's really convenient, but that's assuming that it's been maintained properly and that everything works properly, right? They're generally also a little bit chunky because of all the internal parts that are in there. The chassis and the springs and everything, got to make room for that. Now, I will admit, the Infidel, the Ultratech, the UTX 85, the UTX 75, even like the Scarab, even the Troodon, some of the bigger stuff, they're actually pretty easy to carry. Like, here's your common PM2. Taking a look at the thickness of the Infidel, it's just a little bit thicker, weight on the Infidel, which we're going to talk about when we do the actual review of it. Remember that you can get the Mini, but the weight on the Infidel is not bad. Coming in at 5 ounces, that's fine. A lot of people, that's way too heavy for me. Well, it's not too heavy for me. Carry profile is really important there. So looking at it this way compared to the PM2, it's got a better carry profile in terms of height, and it's almost the same thickness. So yeah, it's not a difficult knife to carry. This is a much larger OTF than most people, are used to seeing. So a smaller one is just going to gain you benefit there. So that's pros and cons there. Side opening automatic knives, a much more dependable deployment mechanism. It's a plunge, sort of a button style plunge lock. There's a torsion bar or sometimes pivot spring in there that fires the blade out. Much less likely, even in a dirt and debris setting, you're much less likely to have a spring like that fail. Yes, they can break, but you can make the same argument for the internals inside of an OTF, which is more durable in terms of the springs that actually deploy the knife. I'm going to say probably I've always thought less parts is better, and there are way less parts on a side opening automatic knife. So I'm going to say the durability of the spring, because there's actually 2 springs in here. The spring, the torsion bar, the coil spring on the inside of the pivot, it's definitely going to be more durable on a side opening automatic knife. Debris, there's not, especially like on this ProTech here on the inside, it's actually running on phosphor bronze, which is generally the case with side opening automatic knives or the nicer US versions. This knife, prime example. It's actually got a little bit of, there you go, right there. You see all that gunk that's in there? This is from my buddy Steve using it. It definitely has gunk inside there, but it's not getting in between the scale or the washer and the blade. So, and that's because of the setup in there, right? So debris is, for the most part, not going to slow these things down. Now, eventually, like everything else, time destroys everything. So yeah, eventually, you know, you're going to need to take it apart and clean it. It's much easier. Now, I know ProTech sometimes does the red Loctite thing, but all things considered, it's easier to get inside one of these than it is one of these. You're a lot less, there's a lot less risks involved in terms of, you know, taking something apart and getting it back together the right way. This is essentially just 2 pieces of aluminum, a couple of screws, a couple of washers, and the blade, and then the plunge lock, right? A lot easier to maintain, a lot less need. You don't have to baby this thing nearly as much. It's just going to be easier to get into. Durability all the way around is just going to be better, even with the plunge lock, which is also not, you know, a button lock that's on an OTF, or I'm sorry, an automatic knife. Now, I know sometimes, like Benchmade has some automatic axis locks. There's some other styles out there, but your typical side opening automatic knife is going to use a button like this. This entire setup all the way around is going to be more durable than an OTF. You take 1 second to look down in the comment section, and at least one person has typed me up a big long book, which I have not bothered to respond to at all because I can't stand, I won't read it. But somebody has typed me up a big long book about why I'm wrong about that. And that's fine, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But in my experience, this entire setup, whether you're coming at it from actual experience or you're looking at it on paper, less parts, more durable setup, it's just gonna be a more durable knife. So if you're wondering, like, I want an automatic, but I just want whichever one's more durable, it's gonna be the side opener. Deployment speed, trivial. They deploy when you push the button. That's the convenience of this knife, right? So you're up on a ladder, you got a hand busy, you're on an unstable surface, you just need your tool to do its job real quick so you can get out of that situation and stop putting yourself in that bad situation that you have to be in to get that particular job done. Push the button, it's deployed, you can do that. Now here's the problem. Here's where there's a disadvantage with this guy and an advantage with this guy. You have to push that button, push this down, work against the spring, which is fighting you. It's trying to redeploy it, right? You've already got something to deal with this hand. You're going to push that down, and it's trying to come back like this. At the same time, you're trying to keep these fingers out of the way so that you can close the knife and have that button click back out so you can safely put it back into your pocket. That's not ideal. A few times I've used the Boker Kalashnikov outside, been in a similar situation, and I found myself just doing this. Deploy it, make the cut, and then I end up just putting the knife somewhere fully deployed, right? And then going ahead and doing what I'm doing. Now, that's all fine, but if you're up on a roof, right, and you put this knife up on the roof deployed like this, and it starts to slide, those of you who have worked on construction sites, one of the biggest no-nos, and I've broken this rule so many times with my dad, leaving tools on a sloped surface. Why? Because they slide and they fall, and anybody who's working underneath you is going to have that thing come down on their head, whether it's a pry bar or a hammer, or in this very unfortunate situation, a fully deployed switchblade. Not good. Not good at all. So if you're in a situation where you can just stab this into the surface of something, which is generally what I'll do, is just jam it into the wood. It's better than just leaving it there, but it's not 100% trustworthy. With the OTF, you can simply fire it, you know, retract it, put it back in your pocket. You're safer with this guy. You know, and those are very, very specific circumstances. And I know that I could talk about a million different situations, a million different folding knives that are automatic side openers and OTFs that might be better or worse. But that's the meat and potatoes of it. That's the gist of my thoughts on that. So yeah, so benefits here, much easier to maintain, a lot more durable in general. You know, the downside being that there's more movements and it's a lot more. It's actually much more inconvenient than even a standard folding knife, because on a standard folding knife, when you're putting the knife away, you're not working against a spring. Now, you will adapt. You'll adapt to this. Steve, who uses this knife, tells me he's completely adapted to it. It's just an afterthought. He doesn't even have to think about it. He can just put it away with one hand. And that's the case. You're going to adapt to any locking system that you are constantly carrying. Now, another pro of the OTF is that in the case, especially in the case of the Infidel, you can, it's one of the only style of knives. Now, a lot of people say there's like the Hinder and Maximus dagger that has a double-edged blade and okay, maybe, but I don't know that I've ever seen a side-opening automatic knife that was actually designed, that wasn't some weird Chinese company that's not concerned with the safety of anybody, that has a double-edged blade that's easy to, how would you put that back away, right? The point I'm getting at is on an OTF, you can have a true double-edged blade. Why is that important? Because you literally have this knife, the edge will wear down twice as slow as a standard edge. A lot of it has to do with geometry and heat treatment and type of steel, blah, blah, blah. But you take an infidel, and then you take another infidel with a drop point blade, exact same steel, exact same heat treat, exact same thing. The only difference is one has two edges, one has one. Well, you've got double the edge life of the dagger version than a single edge. So that is an advantage. Now, the problem is that the strongest part of the blade is gonna then be in the center. So you're, especially on a knife that's got two edges, the durability overall, the strength of the blade has been drastically reduced. So it's even less advised that you use the knife outside of anything that is a knife task. You can, and infidels have proven, even the weaker double-edged dagger blades have proven to do well. But your setting, your own personal experience, the blade steel, all that's going to have everything to do with it. So that's another advantage there. Now, where the single edge, like these single automatic knives, make up for that. They may not have the edge capacity, right, as a double-edged dagger, but you're definitely a way stronger blade. This blade, way stronger. I mean, because you've got, like, the drop point has a flat. It starts out, I think this knife's 125 or 135 thousandths thick, and you have much more material dropping down to a cutting edge. You also are going to have generally better blade performance if you're comparing. Generally speaking, a side opening automatic is going to have a blade that's more like this. It's going to have more room because of the style of knife that it is. It's going to have more room to drop down to a cutting edge that's going to be more geared towards performance. So not only are you going to have a more durable blade, you're probably going to have a blade that's going to emphasize cutting performance a little bit better. So that adds some layers there. And I know that's circumstantial. It depends on the knife, depends on the style. There are definitely side-opening automatic knives that aren't going to emphasize cutting performance nearly as well as some OTFs. But generally speaking, you're going to get better cutting performance out of a side-opening automatic knife because of the style of blade it's likely to have versus an OTF, because most slots in an OTF are basically this size, which means that's all the taller the blade can be to get it reliably in and out of that slot. And if you have a drop point blade, well, great. You've got 3/4 of an inch to drop towards the cutting edge, so it better be pretty thin to begin with. On this style of knife, it is thin. In fact, let's go ahead and measure it here. The blade thickness on the Infidel is 105 thousandths, but you've got such little, you got half an inch to drop towards the cutting edge. So no, it's not going to be a performer. It'll cut, not going to be a performer though. Not going to be a laser beam. So which is better? You talking about the pros and cons? Well, the thing, none of you guys like to hear this. It is circumstantial, right? Some people are simply going to, there's an obvious benefit of having an automatic knife. They live in an area where it's legal. Some people are like, I'm just going to prefer durability. I'm really, really going to beat on my automatic knife. I have to have an automatic knife. It's legal where I live, but I'm going to beat the crap out of it. ProTech, guys. ProTech side opening autos. The Rockeye is one of the best. This is like one of the best automatic. This thing has been beat to crap. Like, it has been beat into the ground. CPM 154 on this super durable blade, this awesome drop point blade. It's based on the Les George Rockeye or the VECP, whatever you want to say. Just an amazing blade steel, amazing automatic design. It's got this bolster, this faux bolster thing, and it's got some texturing. Aluminum holds up super well. People talk about aluminum's not that durable. Aluminum does just fine. It's been dropped. It's been dinged all over the place. I've talked about this knife many times. Steve uses it for anything. He's openly admitted, he was like, that tip has been used to do non-knife things many times. And I'm sure a lot of you have knives out there with much more battle wear than this guy, but that knife has not been babied. It is definitely going to be more durable. But for those of you who are like, listen, I'm not going to beat on my knives. I really take care of my tools, and I'm cognizant of what I'm using them for. That doesn't make you a better person. I'm just saying that's some people are like that. But I do like the convenience. Oftentimes I am working in a situation where I have one hand free and one hand that's very busy. I like the convenience of an OTF, right? And it's absolutely legal, and I love the idea of having two separate edges. I don't need the best cutting performance in the entire world, but I love the idea of going twice the time, before I have to resharpen. You will have to do double the sharpening, right? And you're like, I'm okay, I can keep it cleaned, I'm comfortable taking it apart. Well then, yeah, the OTF is going to be better for you. Truthfully, so I know people hate it when I'm like, well, they're both great. It depends on the situation. People are like, dang it, we stayed here for 25 minutes and you're just going to tell us that they're both great? You guys want to know which one I would pick, which one I would think is better? So this is crazy. This puts me in a weird situation. Number one, this is coming from a standpoint of just a year and a half ago where I thought automatic knives, the idea was ridiculous. It helped fuel the mall ninja crowd and, help making people believe that they're at some sort of tactical advantage using an automatic knife. And it was my old opinion was bringing the wrong types of people into the knife community. I was just being a snob. I was proved wrong. There are those people who think that, and there's nothing you can do about that. But in terms of a cutting tool, I love both. The ProTech Rockeye that would be my vote for the very, very best automatic design out there. And that's also based on my bias and my love for Les George knives, and in particular the VECP version 3. I love that knife. It's amazing. The thing that just drives me crazy is having to adjust and really concentrate on the hand movements that I have to go through to get that blade back here. I am so sure that I am one day going to cut the tips of my fingers off on accident trying to put that blade away, or it's going to fly out of my hand while I'm up on a ladder and I'm going to drop it and it's going to land on a person or one of my dogs or something like that. So I hate that. The OTF, yeah, it's not as durable. Yeah, wiggles around. The locking mechanism is probably not nearly as trustworthy as this guy. There's a lot more moving parts. It's not going to accentuate cutting performance. There's do's and don'ts with it. There's a lot more babying, but man, I cannot deny the level of convenience of being able to just make your cut, go back. The truth is that on a construction site where I would carry a knife, I have access to a lot of tools that are specifically designed for different things, right? It's not likely that I'm going to have to use my knife for a job that would require a specific tool. So yeah, this is more durable, but in a situation where I would really need to beat on something, I'm just going to use a pry bar or a hammer or a hatchet, right? So for a knife task, which is generally just going to be a quick cut into, honestly, it's going to be cardboard, it's going to be rope, it's going to be rubber, it's going to be a zip tie, it's going to be wood, maybe, or sheetrock. That is realistic. Maybe every now and then some light, very, very light metal that's like aluminum or tin, if I really had to, maybe. But other than that, nothing else. It's probably not going to be used to pry because I'll have a cat's paw on me, I'll have something like that. Now, a lot of people are like, what about in a situation where you're on a desert island and it's a survival? I don't know. I've never been in that situation. I don't think about that. But in my realistic everyday life, doing things that I actually do, the convenience of an OTF is overwhelming for me, honestly. And I've reached the point now where it's like, I really like OTFs. I love them as tools. Yeah, they're scary. They usually make people go, well, you can't carry that, it's illegal. And I'm like, yes, I can, because we're in Kansas and it's been legal since like 2014. It's not going to be legal for everyone. But truthfully, the one that I would pick, the one that works the best for me, is an OTF. The Infidel's awesome. And it's funny because I called the Benchmade Infidel recently one of the most overrated knives of all time. So I'm like, it's like a heavy contradiction, but there's a different reason. Number one, I have to use the Infidel in this example because it's convenient because I have one in my possession. When I say overrated, when I talked about the Infidel in specific, I think, considering the materials and the competition for OTFs out there, the American OTF, I think of the Ultratech, and I feel like the Ultratech is just, you can get it in the same configuration as an Infidel, but it costs $130 less at least. So it was more based on price and the competition, overrated versus the competition out there, and I feel like there are OTFs that are built a little bit better, but that doesn't stop me from thinking that the Infidel is an incredible knife that's capable of doing, what most people are going to ask of it. So yeah, I think truthfully, I can't believe it, but I honestly think that I would take an OTF, I can't stress this enough. It's very important that you check and make sure if you're going to actually be like, okay, you've convinced me, I'm going to go buy an OTF. Make sure it's legal. Make sure it's legal to own. Make sure it's legal to carry. Make sure that the blade length is legal in your area. Make sure it's legal to have a dagger, right? Some places are, it's like, yeah, everything's great. You can't have a dagger, right? So you got to get a single one. But yeah, that's how I'm going to conclude this. This was really fun to do, and I got really worked up talking about this. But they're both great. You can't go wrong with either. Like if you want to choose a side opener, that's great. A lot of people are going to say they're both stupid, carry a folding knife, or that's stupid, use a fixed blade. That's fine. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about automatic knives. But yeah, that would be my choice. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this little discussion, if you found it entertaining, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.